A couple weeks ago, I stumbled upon a crazy piece of history from the Second World War. It turns out thousands of Nazi Germans and black-shirt Italians were brought to the Arizona desert in handcuffs to be imprisoned. And a forgotten prisoner of war camp stood right here at Papago Park, right in the middle of the city I grew up in. I've been coming to this park my whole life. What's even crazier, the largest manhunt on American soil during the war happened right here in Phoenix. As millions celebrated Christmas in 1944, 25 Nazi prisoners tunneled their way out of camp and ran loose into the desert night. That sounds like a crazy story, I know. I had a lot of questions too. So let's go back to the very beginning. The pioneers who first documented traveling through here didn't see much beauty or potential in the deserts of the Southwest. For many, this was another stretch of dangerous, barren wasteland you had to get through to find the lush green hills of the Pacific coast. Nobody really wanted to settle here at first. So then President Ulysses Grant first designated the area surrounding the Papago Mountains as a reservation for the Maricopa and Pima Indian tribes. These Native Americans are actually descendants of the ancestral Sonoran Desert people, who dug hundreds of miles of canals in the Salt River and Gila River valleys for hundreds of years. Their society faced a widespread collapse starting in the late 1300s, and nearly 300 years later, Spanish explorers would find ruins throughout southern Arizona. Eventually, new people grew curious about this landscape and would come to find and renew the ancient canal networks. Phoenix was formally established in 1868 and was named to commemorate a new town rising from the ruins of the former civilization. In 1914, President Wilson then declared this land the Papago Saguaro National Monument, and that existed for a little bit, until Congress abolished it in 1930. As America joined the fight against the Axis powers, there was a rush to build prisoner of war camps across the country. We needed somewhere to put all of the Kriegsmarine soldiers and officers being captured out in the Atlantic. One of these camps was built here in 1943. Right alongside the canal, complete with barracks and barbed wire and watchtowers and patrol roads and more fences than you could count. It took up around 160 acres in all. The Army engineers who built some of the camp had to use explosives in order to put fence posts into the hard-packed and rocky dirt. That's part of the reason the guards were convinced that there was no way anybody could dig a tunnel through it. But that's exactly what the fascists did. They were able to dig a tunnel to the outside world and descend upon the vast desert that lay beyond. The Nazis scheduled 3-man shifts to dig this tunnel little by little, and had the great fortune of being able to bring the dirt right up to the surface without looking suspicious. They had asked their American guards if it was okay to build a Faustball court a few weeks earlier, and the guards said sure. Just build it yourselves. The tunnel itself needed to be the perfect length if these men were going to make it out unnoticed. If they dug too little, they would surface right on the patrol road surrounding the camp. If they dug too far, they would pierce the bank of the Crosscut Canal and die a muddy death underground where nobody would hear them scream. The prisoners played it as safe as they could and used trigonometry to calculate the exact length of tunnel that they needed. They were able to complete the tunnel within 5 months and escape the night before Christmas Eve. They surfaced near a telephone pole, under the canopy of a tree and surrounding shrubbery. The men then plunged into the Crosscut Canal and quietly swam away. Today, the very exit mark of this Nazi tunnel sits behind the neighborhood along an urban canal path. It has a plaque on it, and people run, bike, and scooter past it every day. From this hole in the ground, most of the Nazis fled south toward Mexico. That seems like an awfully long hike for a bunch of Croats who had probably never seen a desert. Lots of them ended up surrendering in the Phoenix and Tempe area within days, but a handful of them did manage to get pretty close. A few of them made it down to the Tlahana Nation on our southern border and made a plan to cross into Mexico at night. They were caught sleeping in the desert in the middle of the day by native scouts and were returned to Papago Park. 2 others gave themselves up near Casa Grande, which is a town named after the ancient ruin and national monument, another relic of the ancestral Sonora desert people. Casa Grande was first found abandoned back in 1694 and was given that name by a priest, here on behalf of the Spanish crown. 250 years later, a soldier here on behalf of the German Führer would step on a cholla cactus in the middle of the night. The pain was debilitating, and his partner helped guide him to an empty couch in an empty farmhouse. A rancher and his wife then came home to find 2 escaped Nazi prisoners sitting in their living room, thirsty, hungry, and begging for surrender. Another trio managed to get their hands on a map of Arizona and thought to themselves, "There's a big river that goes right through town, and we're sailors." They came up with a daring plan to build a kayak and take the Salt River out of town, then take the Gila River out of Arizona, then take the Colorado River out to the Sea of Cortez. From there, they'd be able to get to the port city of Weimar, Sonora, where they could demand passage on a specific line of Chilean ships mastered by Germans, and then hitch a ride all the way down to Santiago, Chile. The other prisoners were amused at this idea and started calling these 3 Die 3 verrückten Bootsmänner, which means the 3 crazy boatmen. What an extraordinary journey that would have been. The thing about the Salt River, though, it's pretty dry in the winter. El Rio Salado would have been more of a stream than a river for the 3 musketeers. They tried to carry their kayak along the riverbed in all the places where it was too shallow or too dry to float. After a few hours, they gave up on their stupid idea and got rid of their stupid kayak. They were caught near the town of Gila Bend, when one of them thought to take a quick bath in a stream. He was actually caught with his pants down. Of the 3 boatmen, this one might have been the craziest. Within 17 days of making a run for it, all but 3 of the escapees had been captured. The remaining 3 were named Kremer, Kozur, and Wattenberg, who seemed to have vanished without a trace. As the escapees returning to Papago were interrogated, the army quickly learned that not all 25 of the men made the personal choice to leave the comforts of the camp. As the highest-ranking officer, Captain Wattenberg was able to order 2 underlings to escort him on a totally different route from the rest. These 2 would have no choice, really. Remember that the Nazis brutalized each other. They turned on each other all of the time. During the Battle of Berlin that would happen 4 months later, Hitler demanded that the remaining civilian militia, the Volkssturm, take up arms and defend the city from the Allied forces, to fight the war that the Nazis had started. Goebbels demanded that all Germans accused of desertion or refusal to defend the Reich be hung from lampposts in the street. The Red Army would find countless numbers of people who had been recently hung across Berlin as they took over the streets one by one. Instead of dashing across the desert to cross the border, Wattenberg figured it would be safer to go north and hide out in the mountains overlooking Phoenix. The 3 men hiked past Camelback Mountain and up into the rocky peaks and ridges of what is today the Phoenix Mountain Preserve. Here they were able to find a rocky overhang where they could hide until the coast was clear. Not daring to risk his own capture, Captain Wattenberg ordered his companions to go down into Phoenix and scavenge what they could. Kozur and Kremer were able to secure a little bit of food as well as a stack of local newspapers. That's how they found out that most of the others had already been caught. At this point, they must have known that the chances of making it to Mexico were slim at best. But the story gets crazier from here. Wattenberg ordered Kremer to sneak his way back into the prisoner of war camp and set up a supply line to keep them fed on the outside. He actually succeeded in returning to the camp unnoticed by sneaking in with the work crew and switching places with somebody else. As you'd expect, other prisoners recognized him and asked him what he had been up to. Kremer made the mistake of telling Helmut Kuger, who had already spilled his Nazi beans to the Americans. Kuger sold him out immediately, and Kremer did not get to sneak back out of the camp as planned. The fate of Wattenberg now laid in the hands of Kozur. Soon enough, he too would be caught trying to smuggle himself back into the camp for food. So then Wattenberg got the mountain hideout all to himself. He sat up here alone for 3 days, hoping one of his companions would return. With no other choice really, he eventually decided to make his move. He cleaned himself up and set off toward downtown Phoenix. Even though his face was in all of the local papers, he was able to walk right into the Hotel Adams and ask for a room. They told him they didn't have one available, but invited him to rest in the lobby until one opened up. After spending several hours asleep in a chair, Wattenberg wandered onto the streets of downtown Phoenix. Here he would make a fatal mistake. He asked a street cleaner for directions to Van Buren Avenue, but he was already standing on Van Buren Avenue. The thick German accent alarmed the street cleaner, who then went and reported the interaction. A cop caught up with Wattenberg right here on this block, and at last the great Papago escape came to a close on January 28, 1945. After all of the escapees were returned to Papago Park, they were anxious. They feared the harsh punishment that must have been planned for them, and had no clue what the American soldiers were about to do to them. All that they got was a temporary diet of bread and water. I'm serious. They were so lucky to be on American soil. In the European theater of war, the Nazis killed the captured enemy soldiers without hesitation. In fact, just a week before the escape attempt, on December 17, 1944, over 80 American soldiers surrendered to the Nazis in a small town in Belgium. They were then rounded up and killed by sudden machine gun fire. Images of the soldiers' frozen corpses that made it into the news infuriated the American public. And then Arizona citizens found out that some of these Germans captured in the desert were found with slabs of bacon provided to them by the US Army. Wartime rations made it hard for regular people to get their hands on anything like that, so to hear that enemy soldiers were getting entire slabs of bacon was outrageous. One article from the time reads, "Unfortunately, because the army leans backward in observing the Geneva Conference, these Nazis will return home when the war is ended with the firm conviction Americans are stupid and soft. Incidentally, they will be more steeped in Nazism than ever, for we are doing nothing to change them." That was published in the Arizona Republic. I'm not sure which part I agree with more, that we're stupid, that we're soft, or that we're doing nothing to change Nazis. The Papago Mountains have seen it all. They watched an ancient people carve life into the desert, and then watched a sprawling city flourish from that foundation. They've also watched as an old threat found its way back into the world, one we thought we had defeated. What kind of society has come to replace the old one? The wars of the past were not fought against mythical monsters. They were fought against real people, misled and radicalized over time. Today, many limit their understanding of Nazi Germany to one tyrant, forgetting that an entire nation was conditioned to follow him. Hitler's seizure of power in 1933 changed everything. Overnight, the Nazis went from a fringe extremist group to the rulers of Germany. Goebbels was named the Minister of Propaganda, and suddenly the Nazis could control education, media, culture, and politics. Have you ever considered the propaganda your government feeds you? Within months of becoming chancellor, he would suspend civil liberties, arrest thousands of political opponents, and build a private police force of fanatics. He then passed laws without the consent of any Congress. History repeats itself. Even those we fought alongside in the Second World War have forgotten who and what it is that we fought. It starts with denial, with people rejecting the basic facts of history, with the erosion of truth itself. Those who know nothing about history have begun to preach on it. Celebrities go on podcasts to say Hitler did good things, and billionaires buy online platforms to give those views legitimacy. Meanwhile, scientists, historians, and teachers, the very people who defend truth, are ridiculed and silenced. I read an article in The Atlantic that put it perfectly. When conspiracy theories and nonsense cures are widely accepted, the evidence-based concepts of guilt and criminality vanish quickly too. That's how it is on this bitch of an earth.